balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic. Providing context on today's events, this is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, Whiskey Warriors. It is Friday. Yes, we've made it through another week. Welcome to American Perspective with me as your host. Oh my goodness. You know, Mrs. Whiskey's got some bacon cooking and it's just filling up the entire studio here. My mouth is watering, so if I end up kind of slurring my words or doing something a little unusual, like you see a little spittle coming out, that's why. Oh my gosh. To me, I mean, well, smoked beef or smoked meat, I should say, not just beef, but smoked meat is like one of my favorites, and bacon definitely is up there as well in terms of the smell. It's just so good. So whatever she's making, man, I'm getting ready for it. Let me just tell you that right now. All right. So tonight, we had a little meltdown in Congress, and I'm sure some of you may have already been, seeing some of the footage and stuff, but, yeah, it's just, anyway, I got a little bit of something on that. We've got some stuff with regards to, the Democrats, of course, and this administration actually hating Americans and American rights. I have a little bit more on a couple of things with the elections, and also a little bit of economic news toward the end of the night, if I can get that far. In terms of whether or not I actually get to it or not, I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so tonight I have up for the Pledge of Allegiance is our wonderful team of Coco, Cam, and Sean. And as I always say, just so everybody doesn't get confused, Sean is autistic and for the mostly nonverbal, but he does join in and with some words in here, but then he'll go and he'll give some sounds as well. So it's really, really good. This is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are of mind, please stand, remove your hat, place your hand over your heart, and join with Coco, Cam, and Sean. See, the mouth watering's already hitting. Coco, Cam, and Sean in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I thank them, of course, for submitting their Pledge of Allegiance. That is fantastic. Thank you very much, Coco, Cam, and Sean, for giving us that wonderful rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance. If you want to do your rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance and have me play it, please take an audio of yourself and saying it, and then send it in to fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. And of course, I will get you into the rotation. Because, let's face it, you guys listen to me enough that you don't want me saying it every day. For sure on that. All right, let me tell you a little bit about TGRN, True Grit Roots Network, with the channel TGRN Blues. And I got to tell you about this wonderful thing. It's called the Blue Plate Special. It's an hour, Monday through Friday, starting at noon Central. And it has a different flavor every day of the week. The reason being is because it's being served up out of the TGRN kitchen by many of our on-air personalities. Come and have lunch with the TGRN Blues crew, weekdays, Monday through Friday, noon to 1 Central Time, featuring tasty blues and R&B cuts right from our kitchen. It's a great way to enjoy lunch together. Join hosts Vinnie Marini, Jonathan Oogie Richards, Jeff Hayes, Holly Harris, and Memphis Mark for the Blue Plate Special on TGRN Blues. Once again, that airs weekdays, noon to 1 Central Time. All right, let's get into it right now, folks. You all know that the Democrat administration that we have in the White House hates you. That's right. They hate Americans like yourselves, like me. Red-blooded patriot Americans. Nothing can show that more than when they do things like this. Let me just show you here. This is a story out of Town Hall. Biden DHS claims the privacy of illegal aliens on the terror watch list overrides the rights of Americans. Now, when I was growing up, I was told that the Constitution of the United States superseded everything and that American citizens were supposed to come first in the country called the United States of America. Well, when you see stuff like this, it makes me really, really wonder how far we have actually fallen. Biden, according to recent data released by CBP, the Customs Border Protection, the number of suspected terrorists who have illegally entered the U.S. is up over 2,500% since, of course, the Trump administration. Now, the Department of Homeland Security claimed this week that the privacy interests of illegal aliens outweigh the American citizens' right to know. What? The agency wrote to Fox News correspondent Bill Maloogian in a FOIA request, quote, "The privacy interests of the individuals in the records you have requested outweigh any minimal public interest in disclosure of the information. Any private interest you may have in that information does not factor into the aforementioned balancing test." Now, he clarified on his X post here that he did not request any personal information that would risk the safety of those illegally residing in the U.S. Rather, what he was asking for was just the nationalities of the people arrested who were part of the terror watch list. And here's the post right here. You can see it on the screen if you're watching on Rumble. He says, 6+ months ago, I filed a FOIA request with CBP seeking the nationalities of the people on the terror watch list arrested by Border Patrol in recent years. The CBP now says they will not turn over that data, citing privacy and law enforcement sensitivity exemptions. Yeah. Well, I talked to you a little bit about the number of Chinese nationals that are being apprehended or blocked at the U.S.-Mexican border. By blocked, I mean collected and then sent elsewhere. Over 200 Chinese illegal aliens being caught in San Diego just in 1 week. Yeah, I was talking about the over 27,000 Chinese nationals across the southern border. So apparently now just asking for, the nationalities of anybody that was on the terrorist watch list just to get an idea of where they might be coming from, apparently that is not superseded by the fact that the American people actually need the information. I mean, that should be stuff that is open That's should be open public information. It's not like we can hunt these people down. It's just a mess. It's just a mess. Oh, I can't understand this at all. All right. Barring all of this, let's go take a look at some more election stuff. You know, the more I dig into this election thing, the more that I get frustrated with the whole idea. You know, I used to like not necessarily not pay attention, because I was paying attention more to what was being presented in terms of the people and the, you know, the in our case, some of the initiatives and things like that were going to help guide and shape our laws here in the state and in the country. But I wasn't really paying necessarily any attention to the other things in terms of the election integrity, because I think for a lot of Americans, we all were raised with the erred belief, erred as an ERR, erred belief that the government had our best interests at heart. And anyway, this came out furthering my questions of not only 2020, 2022, 2018, 2016, how far back do we really need to go in order to figure this stuff out? But this is in the Federalist. A judge apparently ordered a redo of the 2022 judicial race in Texas after more than 1,400 illegal votes were cast. Now, this isn't illegal. Keep in mind, this isn't illegal votes, meaning votes by illegals who were voting like non-citizens, like I've been going after for quite some time over the last, several episodes. This is just plainly illegal votes. Judge David Peoples ruled Wednesday that the 2022 race between Republican Tammy Pierce and Democrat Deshaun Jones for the 180th District Court in Harris County must be held again after finding the true outcome of the election cannot be determined. Pierce contested the race after losing by just 449 votes to the incumbent Jones. Jones, however, filed a motion to dismiss, which was later rebuked by Peebles as being frivolous. Peebles ultimately found 1,430 invalid votes were cast and declared it was not realistic or feasible to determine which candidate received those votes. The court has also found a net margin of 321 votes were cast for Jones over Pierce in the extended 1 hour of voting on Election Day, which the court has found resulted from an official mistake by the Harris County Elections Administration's office, Peoples wrote. Pierce argued that, in part, that 953 votes were cast by out-of-county residents whose statement of residence forms show on their face a residence other than in Harris County, and that 245 voters submitted incomplete statements of residence which gave no information about their residence. Now, if a voter has changed residences but still lives in Harris County, he must submit a statement of residence testifying that he still meets the residency requirements for voting there. All right. So this is not a particular case of like illegals voting, but when you start adding a lot of these things up, illegals voting in our elections, which the Democrats, by the way, and a lot of the sycophantic leftist morons on all the socials keep talking about, oh no, that's not happening. Yeah, it's not happening. It is happening, folks. It is happening because we have a very loose election system, especially what's been broken down based on what happened during COVID. But anyway, in this particular case, we actually have people who are outside of the county who are voting, and that doesn't occur, right? Yeah, it does occur. It occurs all the time. People don't update their places of residence. It gets sent in the mail and then forwarded. And yeah, there's I don't know how many numbers of stories that we've seen of people in California, for an example, of California voters getting ballots in states when they haven't even lived in California for a while. And, other counties and things like that. All of this is what adds up to election integrity. And that literally is all that the Republicans and conservatives, that's all we want, is we just want election integrity. That's it. Tommy, apparently, who lives in Texas, by the way, Tommy over on Facebook says, yes, it is. Harris County, Houston, totally illegals being driven to the polls by the busload and led to the booths with instructions of who to vote for. And she says that the local mainstream media ignored it. Independents had all kinds of video of it going on. Well, yeah, that's pretty much what happens. Illegals are happening. Now, this next story is just a one particular example of a snafu, realistically, in the, shall we say, documentation of just one individual out of the 150 million plus people that vote. You can't tell me that this isn't happening either. So Fox News found a Florida man who learns that he is not a citizen after living and voting in the U.S. for decades. Now, according to this report, a Florida man named Jimmy Kloss, 66, is working to prove that he is a U.S. citizen. And reportedly, he's lived in the U.S. for more than 60 years, has been paying taxes and voting, has learned now that he is not a citizen and cannot receive Social Security payments because of this. He apparently lives in Clearwater, has a mother who is Canadian and a father who is American. He was brought to the U.S. when he was just 2 years old, according to the reports. Klaus told WKMG-TV, my dad's roots were in Brooklyn, New York, and 2 years into my existence, they decided to load up the truck and move to Beverly, so to speak. We moved to Tennessee Avenue in Long Island, to be more specific, and we moved into the house next to my grandparents. Klaus said that he acted like a regular citizen after receiving a Social Security card, a driver's license, a voter registration card. He even told the TV station he was accepted into the Marine Corps as a police officer originally, but chose a different path due to being newly married with a child on the way. So here's the thing, okay? Here's the check, is that you have this guy who, I mean, by all rights, his dad being American, he should at least be able to apply for citizenship, depending upon where he was born. It looks like he was born in Canada, so he doesn't have like the being born. It kind of depends on where he was born, in terms of, was he born in Canada for like some sort of did his dad work as a government, on a government mission or whatever? But here's the thing, is that even regardless of all that, because that's getting into some nuances, regardless of all that, this guy who felt and thought that he was an American citizen has gone and voted, gotten his Social Security card. He's gone through all of these things. He was even allowed to sign up for the military, which, the military actually will take immigrants. In fact, it used to be that the military would actually, after, 4 years of service or whatever, would actually give you citizenship in some cases in the past. But here he is. He thinks he's American. He believes he's American. He goes ahead and votes, and not once was anybody ever checking. And at any time, his U.S. citizenship until he applies to get Social Security. And then he finds out, well, you're technically not a U.S. citizen. Now, I'm not picking on this guy. I don't want to pick on this guy at all, really. Because of the fact that he basically it was apparently a mistake. I mean, the guy lived here all of his life, but it's an example of where the cracks in the system really exist. That if this is one guy, no matter how honest he may be or his parents may be, they never filed the proper paperwork. He never became an actual U.S. citizen according to whatever laws are there. And it's not to disparage him at all. I mean, he was 2 years old. That's really more on his parents than anything else. But the point here is that this guy has gone through all of these things, and all of a sudden now he's been denied being a U.S. citizen. So how many other people do we have that realistically are not citizens who are voting in elections, whether they believe they're a citizen or not? As I pointed out in an earlier episode, as I pointed out, there really isn't anything if the non-citizen votes in our elections, there's really no punishment, because as long as they believe in their heart of hearts that they are a U.S. citizen, they get off with no punishment. But this story highlights the even bigger problem, which is even all of these checks and balances that we're supposed to have apparently never worked for this guy. Okay, Tommy asks, if the father is a citizen, doesn't that automatically make the child a citizen? Technically, according to the law, no. If he were born in the U.S., and it's indicating because he was brought here at the age of 2 years old, he actually was physically born in Canada. Now, there is an exception for people who are born abroad on things like military bases, if they're born in the service to the country, like if they're part of an ambassador, maybe their parents are an ambassador and they get born in the other country. There are exceptions to those rules that are allowed for all of that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to gain citizenship. In this particular case, that's why I was saying in the beginning of this that it sort of depends on what the dad was doing. If the dad was in Canada just to be, working in Canada and not working for like the U.S. government or the U.S. military, then he probably wouldn't have gotten there. Now, you're stretching it here, because you're saying, okay, so what if a couple is on vacation and she has the baby? Okay. That is also a little bit of a different story, because of the fact that usually, if you think about that, the couple's going to be on vacation and they are both American citizens. We're talking about a split here, one being a citizen and the other one not. So, yeah, and that if both of them are citizens, then yes, the kid is automatically a kid or a citizen. But in this particular case, no, not necessarily. So there are a lot of nuances when it comes to some of this stuff. So, but anyway, the point being here is that if this guy is kind of stuck, what happens to everybody else? So, again, all I'm doing is I'm just bringing this up as sort of a a validation, essentially, of the holes in our system that we have when it comes to people voting, in particular, voting in our elections when they're non-citizens. That because we don't have any sort of check and balance, that's kind of where we're at. We're in kind of a sad spot when it comes to some of this. And yes, I do agree, as she points out, it's just wrong that the guy had Social Security his whole life, and now he's told, nope, you're out of luck. And that is because of the fact that he actually isn't really, when you register for Social Security, that's your business that's doing it, not you. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, and Tommy's also mentioning the things about the quote unquote anchor babies. But anyway, so yeah. All right. Slight shift in gears here from elections. You remember how I was telling you about Biden exerting executive privilege over the audio tapes of his conversations with special counsel Hur, and how he exerted that executive privilege? Well, I mentioned last night that there is a potential that executive privilege does not necessarily extend to things like potential criminal matters, and that the courts have gone in that way in the past and have basically said, well, it's not really executive privilege for the most part is used in order to prevent and again, it goes back to the whole separation of powers. It's used to prevent information inside baseball, let's say, in terms of the executive branch and how they are doing things. So in this particular case, because the transcript has already been released, there really isn't any reason per se to not to essentially not get his or to not have, sorry, I was reading the chat for a second there. I got a little lost. There is no reason that he can enact executive privilege over the audio tapes, because the information's already been out there. So it's kind of going to be a little murky, bit of a question. But it turns out there's actually a lawsuit that's already in play. So it's entirely possible that Congress may not have to go after the executive branch in order to get the audio released. Taking a look at this in Town Hall, the lawsuit that could get the audio from Biden's special counsel interview released. In April, before President Biden moved to formally block its release, Heritage Foundation's oversight project sued the Department of Justice for the audio recording of the interview during the DOJ's probe of the president's mishandling of classified documents. After President Biden announced Thursday morning that he would invoke executive privilege, the legal efforts by Heritage to obtain the tapes have become even more critical. So, because of the fact that this lawsuit was actually already in play, the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia ordered an expedited briefing schedule for Heritage Foundation and Biden administration lawyers earlier this month, despite the Justice Department's objections and attempts to drag the matter out. At the time of the court order, the Oversight Project's executive director, Mike Howell, noted that the DOJ was acting as President Biden's personal lawyer by unlawfully refusing to turn over the audio tape. It must be a bad interview for Biden and likely related to why he shattered the presidential tradition of giving legitimate interviews. Howell also explained that that Americans have an overwhelming interest in hearing Biden's voice in an official criminal interview, and that they have the right to hear for themselves the interview that led her to say that Biden has diminished mental faculties, and that a jury would be reluctant to convict an elderly man with poor memory. Heritage isn't alone in seeking it as a matter of public interest, which we have it. We have it. Other entities pursuing legal action to obtain the recording include groups of media outlets like CNN, ABC News, the Associated Press, Bloomberg, CBS, The Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, Reuters, Univision, The Washington Post, and Scripps. Now, the members of Congress, of course, have been sending that stuff and sending out subpoenas, and they've been defied by Merrick Garland, and he's potentially going to face contempt of Congress charges. Now, we've already pointed out multiple times that the transcripts have already been released. So because the transcripts have already been released, it's not like there's anything special here outside of potentially the embarrassment to the president that, Garland actually alluded to during his interview, where he was saying that they were exerting executive privilege over this. So Merrick Garland actually called out in the interview. He's like, all they want to do is just cut up the tape and use it in a political fashion. Well, then you've already released the transcript. What else? What other motivation might you have, Merrick Garland and White House administration, to keep the audio tape? There's nothing special if what is on the transcript is literally what's on the audio tape, then there shouldn't be any reason why it can't be released, at least at this point. So this is going to be kind of interesting, and that brings us to the main topic of the evening, which is essentially here in the Epic Times, of course, it talks about the fact that two House panels, they cleared contempt resolutions against Merrick Garland. So they voted last night, and they voted to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress, despite President Joe Biden's intervention to block him from obtaining the recorded interviews. After a spirited debate, members of the House Judiciary Committee voted 18-15 to approve the resolution to hold Garland in contempt, and the House Oversight Committee followed suit just a few hours later, voting 24-20 to approve their own resolution. Now, both of those measures would have to pass the full House before a referral is actually made to the Justice Department. And so the question is whether or not House Speaker Mike Johnson is actually going to bring the resolutions to the floor. I hope he does, but then again, he may not. I don't know. The Justice Department did not respond to a request for comment by the Epic Times. And the vote came after hours anyway. So yeah, this is going to heat stuff up. This is really going to heat stuff up. And it did heat stuff up last night. Let me explain why. So apparently the House, this was the House Oversight Committee, because this is James Comer's committee, got a little heated. And let me kind of set the stage for you. First of all, I need to be clear on this, that there are several members of Congress that I actually believe act like teenagers. at times and are probably intellectually about that same level. And it's not just Democrats, by the way, that are like this. Even though Democrats hold the majority of people who act this way, the Democrats and the Republicans both have their stellar folks, okay, on either side of the aisle. And here's the problem. You know, we have spent, and I actually noticed this, you know, several, and I'm talking like over a decade ago, that most people are not paying attention to the body politic, and they're just voting people kind of like what they would vote for, say, American Idol or The Real World or Road Rules or any of those reality TV shows. They basically are being put into situations where they vote for whoever looks the best, might give the best zingers, might have the coolest name, might have the greatest, tagline, and they're not actually paying attention to the reality and the, let's be honest, enormity of what could potentially happen when you have the less than smartest people representing us in Congress. That got presented last night. And so here it was discussed on MSNBC. And so here's the soundbite. Just take a listen to this and I'll be right back with some more commentary on it.
Chaos on Capitol Hill overnight.
Order.
A hearing about the Justice Department's handling of President Biden's special counsel interview devolving into personal attacks and shouting.
You're not.
Yeah, you're not. You don't have enough intelligence.
Chair recognizes Mr. Perry.
Okay, move to strike the. I move to strike the lady's.
I move to strike
the lady's words again.
The opening insult coming from far-right Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, attacking Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No, ain't nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Order.
Mr. Chairman, that's beneath even you.
Get the order of your committee.
Order.
Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez coming to Crockett's defense.
That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Are your feelings hurt?
Her words down. Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Crockett eventually hitting back.
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
The contentious hearing was originally called as part of the GOP's push to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress.
Okay. Folks, as entertaining as that might have been, let's just point out, this is supposed to be a house, and I'm not talking about the House of Representatives, but this is supposed to be a place of decorum. This is supposed to be a place of honor and dignity, and they are supposed to be focusing on things that are pertinent to the direction and the laws in this country. Did you hear Ocasio-Cortez? Girl, baby girl, no. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, I already think that she's like probably the dumbest member of Congress, arguably the dumbest member of Congress, realistically, but she definitely presented that. With that whole thing about girl, baby girl, and looking like she, or at least sounding like it was going to be the start of what is essentially a girl fight. I also am going to be critical of Marjorie Taylor Greene. We know she's a Spitfire. I already know that, but she generally tends to hold that kind of stuff until she's in front of the cameras rather than, necessarily defaming or whatever in front of and inside the Congress places of Congress. Although I will have to admit, she did take a lot of heat for showing pictures, essentially, of Hunter Biden in the buff and things like that. Look, I'm embarrassed that we have a individual in the White House who can't even complete a coherent sentence, who is supposed to be a wise old man who is, very well traveled and is able to govern with, incredible wisdom and so on and so forth. And he's supposed to be, a Catholic with ethics and so on. And he's not. He's not anywhere near it. He's, oatmeal brains. And then you have this group of individuals who are supposed to be the best representatives that we can find to represent us in Congress. And, the majority of them, believe it or not, are supposed to be like lawyers, because that's literally what they're doing, is they are writing laws. Many of them have law degrees, not all, but many do. And it descends into something like that. I don't know if anybody's ever seen things like some of the stuff that happens over in the UK in Parliament, or some of the other parliamentary areas surrounding the world. Like I've seen the Japanese, who are usually very stoic, but I've seen footage of what I believe, if I can recall, I think it's the Japanese, but it's in the Asian countries, and they have, their parliamentary procedures or whatever, and they actually get into fist fights on their, parliamentary floors. This is ridiculous. This is an utter ridiculous show and a representation, honestly, of who we've elected. We've elected these people. And by we, I know they're not necessarily part of our, I know that I don't vote for AOC. I don't vote for MTG. I don't vote for, any of these others. But please, I mean, if you want to do that, like Tommy just pointed out on Facebook, since these things are so completely out of control, why not just put in a mud wrestling pit in the middle? Have them put on, let's just take this down even further down the road. Let's just put all the women in bikinis and all the men in freaking Speedos. And, if you want to wrestle or whatever, you just go to the mud pit. I like that idea. That actually sounds good. Pay-per-view. There you go. Pay-per-view. That would take care of it. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're supposed to have a level of decorum and decency at these meetings. And they're starting to break down into essentially name-calling, shouting matches, and things like that. That's part of the reasons why they have those rules in place for things like making sure that you're not attacking the person, that you say things like the gentlewoman or the gentleman from blah, 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 that you attack the issues, you debate the issue, you debate what's being presented on the floor. You don't personally go after these people. Yet this is what we voted in. And honestly, to me, this is a pure example of why Teddy Roosevelt, in one of his inaugural addresses, was correct. You need to focus on politics. You need to pay attention to what's going on. And especially you need to pay attention to the people that you are voting to represent you and send off to Congress. Lauren Boebert being caught giving somebody a, sexual satisfaction in a freaking movie theater, that was not something that would be considered dignified. The founders are rolling over in their graves right now with all of this bull crap going on. And while you could sit here and say that what she did was essentially, on her own time, speaking about Lauren Boebert. Still, that's not something that you as a congresswoman should be caught doing. There's a certain level of decorum, decency, honor, respect that needs to be provided for these people. They have certain rules, and it's no different than I think of like a sports figure who's looked up upon by little kids. You may not want that position, but what you may want is to make sure that the people who are up there are actually providing and being role models. Because whether they know it or not, as a part of the job, that just comes with the territory. That's what happens when you get voted in. Should be a position of honor, integrity, ethics. You should be above reproach. But what we've done now is we've turned it into a freaking high school musical. And you don't think that our enemies are looking at stuff like this? And even looking at programs like mine who are picking and highlighting this stuff. You know, that crap about, we're going to bring decency back to the White House, and then a Senate intern is caught having, anal relations on a freaking Senate floor? Are you telling me that that's the kind of America that we want to present to the world? We need to be more assertive and understanding that the people that we send off to Congress, hey, I'm all for sending young people, because I think that young people have a level of, a level of energy that we can bring to the table. But this is ridiculous. This is completely and utterly ridiculous. And it's even sad that we have to see these kinds of things as a part of our representatives in Congress. Is that who America is? Because that's what everybody in the world is going to think. That is what America is all about. People who break down and lose their composure and their cool and start acting like they're going to get into a high school fight. That's the case. Go to a boxing ring. Film it. Freaking sell it for money. Go for it. Maybe not even boxing. Like I said, go for like mud wrestling or WWE style crap. I don't know. That's not the place or the time to do it. And yes, I am also ripping on MTG for the same thing. Yeah. Intelligence is definitely not. We're digging at the bottom of the barrel, and I thought it was bad enough in the White House. I mean, this is across the board, people. This is across the board. And don't get me wrong, there are smart people in Congress, and I'm sure that they're just as disgusted by this as anyone would be or should be. But honestly, I wouldn't want to see either AOC or MTG or whoever that other person was. I don't even know who she is in Congress ever again, because that is ridiculous. All right. Let me shift gears a little bit here. So we all know, and I've been talking about this in terms of the economy and the idea, the Democrats' idea, for an example, the Democrats' idea of raising minimum wage and making minimum wage higher, and how that's going to just solve the problem. And you've seen articles coming out from California where they raised the minimum wage up to $20. Okay, $20 an hour for fast food workers. I talked about it on this show. Of course, Panera Bread was like exempted from it. But anyway, I talked about it on the show, and now all of a sudden the chickens are coming to roost. They're starting to see that the hours being worked and the number of people actually in it are starting to drop. They're getting rid of these people, and they are favoring the organizations, the businesses are favoring going to automated systems. They have limited some of their staff. They're starting to make changes so that, one, they can still keep their prices appealing to people, and two, so they can still keep a little bit of a profit rather than going and throwing it all away, because let's face it, businesses are supposed to make a profit. Well, Seattle was another one of those experimental locations. This article came out. This article came out in the Foundation for Economic Education, which, by the way, if you ever get a chance to read some of these articles from these guys, they're pretty good. I mean, if you have any interest in economics at all, they are really pretty good. But here, this came out, it's Saturday, May 11th, so this is a little while ago, but Seattle's law mandating higher pay for food delivery workers is a case study in backfire economics. So Seattle decided to throw away the whole free market policies, and they put in coercive wage controls for workers, consumers, and small businesses that are paying the price for this. And they did a case study, or they discussed with one of the people. His name is Gary Lardizabal. Wow, that's a name. But anyway, Gary called into a local radio station here and was saying that, hey, I can't pay my rent. The orders are down 30 to 40%. This is not a living wage, it's a dying wage. The legislation that he was talking about was Pay Up, which was a 2022 law passed unanimously by the Seattle City Council that intended to guarantee app-based drivers a living wage by mandating that drivers earn 74 cents per mile traveled and 44 cents per minute, or a minimum of $5 per order. Okay. Unfortunately, and perhaps predictably, like by people like me, the law has actually had unintended consequences. So even though the law raised the minimum wage of delivery workers to about $26 an hour, not counting any tips, by the way, delivery services such as DoorDash and Uber Eats responded by increasing prices. A $5 fee was added to all orders placed through the apps. The result was an estimated 300,000 fewer orders, according to DoorDash, which led to $7 million in lost revenue for the area businesses in Seattle. Not to mention the lost income for the drivers. So DoorDash made a statement that was reported on Fox 13, a local news station here. And it said, it's painfully clear from listening to Dashers, merchants, and consumers that this new law simply isn't working. Gee, I wonder why. Raising stuff like this, like I've always said, you go and you raise this stuff, what happens? They went ahead, they raised the prices accordingly, because these businesses, first of all, food business realistically doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of money off the food. Most businesses make the larger portion of their money off of things like alcohol, which of course you can't order for delivery. Okay. It just doesn't happen. So in the restaurant world, the best thing you can do is provide, in terms of like sit down meals, you can provide the the atmosphere so that these people sit and they drink their wine, they drink their hard alcohol or whatever, beer, however it is. And the more that they drink, the more the profits go up. That's how the restaurant industry actually works. They don't make a lot of money typically off of the food. But that being said, this is delivery in particular. And they're trying to get people to pay more for delivery. Why would I necessarily pay more for delivery when, generally speaking, this is going to sound bad, but generally speaking, most of the companies that are restaurants that are making the food is not that much better for the most part than something I can just go ahead and make at home, and it's cheaper for me to make it. Especially after all of these hikes and everything else. And so people, these liberals don't seem to understand, these leftist morons who failed Econ 101, which, by the way, that was Ocasio-Cortez's chosen field when she can't even figure it out. But Econ 101, they don't seem to understand that, first of all, there's not a lot of price gouging, like they say. There's not a lot of necessarily moving with profits, because in the free market economy, you have to be competitive. These kinds of things, raising the hourly wages and that kind of stuff. In fact, there was after they went to a $15 an hour wage on restaurant workers in Seattle, in the city of Seattle, restaurants were actually losing so much money that they decided, and some of the restaurants that were right on the border, on the city border, they just moved down the street to avoid the $15 an hour wage thing. And many of the restaurants were like, look, if we have to pay our workers $15 an hour, then you don't have to get tips anymore. They were actually telling people, don't tip. We pay them a living wage now. You don't need to be tipping these folks. Because tips are supposed to make up for the difference in what they were making at a minimum wage. That was the point. Tips, meaning to ensure prompt service, was to get them to actually get motivated to do their jobs. In the service industry, the better the service, the better tip you're supposed to make. Granted, that doesn't always happen, but that's the way it's supposed to work. But this whole idea of making a living wage by paying these people $20, $25, $30 an hour, well, makes sense given the number of the high cost of living in some of these cities. People just aren't going to go for that anymore. They can't afford it. They themselves can't afford it. So as a part of this article, they were talking to a couple of other people, and they were all, there was this one driver, for an example, who was profiled by Fortune. His name was Tony Isles. He's a 30-year-old delivery driver who was apparently crushing it, had 10,000 deliveries over the last 4 years by his count, until the wage law went into effect, and then business dried up. And he found himself waiting for 5 to 6 hours on just one Uber Eats request. Demand is dead, he said. And then other Seattle businesses, such as restaurants, have reported massive declines in delivery sales. A local owner of an Albanian bakery, and I can't even pronounce his name because it's a bunch of just letters jumbled together. His first name's Tonin, so I'll just call him that. Tonin said, we've already seen a nearly 50% drop in third-party delivery app sales. And some of the Seattle City Council members are demanding more evidence that the law is backfiring, while others appear to have agreed that the law is a failure. Yeah. So apparently Puget Sound Business Journal reported that Seattle City Council President Sarah Nelson has already ordered staff to draft a proposal to amend the law. She said, I believe we created a problem and it's our responsibility to fix it. So anyway, price and wage controls don't work. They don't. What you need to do is you need to allow the free market economy, the free market system to do what it's supposed to do. That's the whole point. And while we would love to say that, not necessarily, but we would love to say that having Biden back in place was going to be awesome because, you know, we have that awesome economy thanks to Bidenomics. This in the National Post data has shown that half of America's small businesses say they won't survive a second Biden term. So, yeah, the economy is going great for anybody who is not of the middle class, the lower class, have small businesses. Yeah, pretty much 95% of Americans. It's not looking good. And it's not going to get better in terms of future if we allow the Biden administration to stay in the White House. All right. That is it for Friday's episode. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to Rumble, rumble.com, sign up for an account. It's free. And then go and find the American Perspective channel and make sure you follow it. Hit that big green follow button. If you're already signed in, okay, then do me a favor and make sure you hit that thumbs up button or leave a comment or both. And because that helps the channel grow. We will see you tomorrow night. It's 1 hour later. So we're 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. 1 hour later tomorrow night, we'll see you back here on the American Perspective Show with yours truly. Have a great evening, the rest of your evening. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.